Hi guys, welcome back to the Drive Life channel, and you join me on a freezing cold, foggy November morning. It's freezing. It's just one of those really annoying times where it's just above freezing, but it's still too cold to justify being this cold, if that makes sense. It's about 1 degree out, and we've got cold, foggy, horrendous weather. So I thought we would talk about whether you should warm up your car before when it's cold. So this is quite a hotly discussed topic online in terms of, should you idle your car beforehand? Should you should you sort of let it run and warm up? How long should you do it? And I'm going to go through, bust a few myths and explain my thoughts and what I think you should do and what I do. So let's get straight into it. We'll start with a little history lesson. Now, this whole thing comes about from when cars had carburetors, and essentially if the carburetors were cold, they would struggle to mix the air and fuel ratio correctly, meaning that when the cars were cold they would often stall or struggle to start, etc. So it was important to make sure that you had your car running and idling, warming up in the driveway on a cold winter's day before you set off. Now, as technologies have advanced and we've got fuel injection and things like that, the requirement to do this is much more diminished. And actually, in modern cars, most people, or most sort of automotive professionals, advise that actually you don't really gain that much in terms of the benefits of warming a car up, in terms of the engine, that is. Now, I personally choose to let the car idle for a little bit, and that's purely because when you start a car, you have no oil being pumped around the engine. You are relying on a film of oil left over from the last time the car was running, and in order to get the oil running around the engine again, the car has to be running, if that makes sense. So what I like to do to make sure that the car has engine oil in all the right places of the engine, I let it run for a couple of minutes, just while I've come out and I'm warming up. So what I'll do is I'll get in the car, start it up, and then get out and start clearing it off. You can set your heated seats and everything like that and just make it a nice place for you to get into, but we're not doing that for any real gain in terms of the reliability of the car. What we're doing is actually warming the interior of the car and clearing the windscreen and circulating the oil. Now, I would recommend in any temperature that before you go flooring it, that you let the car warm up to its operating temperature. So that can be on your on your temperature gauge. It needs to get up to sort of running temperature, and this can take between 15 to 20 minutes depending on how you're driving. What this does is it means that the engine is now at its optimum sort of operating conditions, and parts are less likely to break and be damaged if you start flooring it at these temperatures. Now, obviously on a cold day, this can take a lot longer due to the external temperatures being colder, and that's why on a colder day you need to give the car a chance to warm up. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be sat on the driveway warming up. It just means that you need to be taking into consideration when you're driving how warm the car is. Now, again, I would probably leave it at least 15 minutes before you start putting your foot down and getting to redline, and that comes from personal experience. You'll find that the car starts to loosen up when it gets up to temperature, and it will perform a lot better because of the internal resistance is much less. Now, the same applies for the transmissions. On these cars, these Volvos, they have an Aisin TF80 SC transmission, which is a 6-speed single clutch unit. And essentially what it does, it relies on fluid to keep it all running nice and smoothly, as all transmissions do. However, at colder temperature, this fluid is thicker, it's more viscous, and it will actually perform less well, if that makes sense. So before you go slamming on the gears and doing things like that, you need to give your transmission a chance to warm up as well, and it tends to warm up around the same rate as the coolant does. I've done a few experiments with various code readers and stuff to monitor the temperatures of the two, and they're fairly inextricably linked in the fact that they will both increase at the same rate at the same time, depending on driving. So yeah, that is sort of the myths busted really. You don't need to let a car idle for 5, 10, 15 minutes to warm it up, because actually idling doesn't do that much. All it does is waste fuel really. So what I tend to do is just start the car up, get out, make sure you've set your heating on obviously before you get out, and give the car a good going over, do any sort of vehicle checks or anything like that that you do, check your lights, clear the windscreen. And by the time you get in and you've done that, then the car should be ready to go. And yeah, that is pretty much all there is to it. Now, electric cars are slightly different, of course. We've got our hybrid Golf here, and what you'll find with hybrid cars in particular is that they will actually start the engine on cold mornings anyway. And this is due to the fact that the car recognises the need for the engine to be warm. It can't just turn on and be expected to perform really well, or if you're on it, so it does take that into account. But what it will do is it actually has battery heaters to make the battery perform better as well. So it will use engine heat to warm the batteries and make sure that the batteries are able to perform, because battery performance gets diminished in cold weather. So yeah, that's just an interesting little thing. Teslas actually have a preheater built in, because obviously they're not hybrid, so they will use electrical energy to heat the cooling tubes. Got a really annoying crow up there, don't know if you can hear that. It will use the electricity to operate a heater, which will then heat the battery and make the batteries perform better. So it's sort of a little bit of a catch-22 really. You have to use electricity to make the electricity more efficient, but yeah, it does work. So that's all there is to it really. So modern cars, we'll just get it summarised. No need to really leave your car to idle that much. Just make sure it's had the oil properly circulated, about 30 seconds or so before you go off flat out. And classic cars, perhaps leave them for a bit longer. But yeah, from me that's it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on this subject. Like I said, it's a highly discussed topic in the automotive world, so be interesting to hear your thoughts. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.